right. From the previous session, we unzipped the Oracle zip file. Now we have a bunch of files and directories in the Oracle home. This is where we are. We just done the unzip, and I asked you to take another snapshot ready for Oracle home. So now we are about to install the Oracle home. Let's take a second snapshot. Take a snapshot, and ready for Oracle home. Now, to install Oracle, we will do run installer as the Oracle user. This tool, Secure CRT, you will run into an error of display. Run installer. It will complain about the graphic display because the installer, the Oracle Universal Installer, OUI, is a Java program that will display a graphic user interface. So this tool, Secure CRT, doesn't do that by default. Sysadmin needs to configure what is called an X server to allow it to do that. But Mobile STM does that naturally. So I'm going to go to Mobile XTEM. Let me be double sure that my environment variable is properly set. Grep Oracle. So the environment variable is not set. So I'm going to exit. I'm going to log back in. Check the environment variable. So it's properly set. I want to change directory to Oracle home where the software was unzipped. So here we go, my Oracle home. Now I can do run installer. /run installer. Mind the spelling of run installer. Unix is very picky about uppercase, lowercase. There you go. Run installer right there. When we run that, the Oracle Universal Installer will be invoked. Sometimes I've had people who start looking for where is it. On your taskbar, a graphic user interface has been opened. Just click on it right there on your taskbar. There it is. So don't just wait there forever and expect it to pop up. If it's not popping up, check on the taskbar. So now in the previous LAB02A, you created and configured a single instance database and allowed the OUI to handle all the aspects of the installation. But now we are going to break the installation into 3 parts. First, we will install software only, which will configure our Oracle home. And then we will use NETMGR and NETCA to configure all the networking tools in place, and then we will use DBCA to create the database. So for this particular lab, we are going to install software only. Next, it's going to be a single instance. This is not a rack. We are installing Enterprise Edition. This is the Oracle home, right? Oracle base right there, and this will be our Oracle home. Ensure this is correct before you proceed. Next. This is where our inventory will be kept. Next. Now, if everything was properly set up, this should default to these groups. Next. At some point, as we install the Oracle software, we will need to run a script, and the root user will be told to run that script. So in Oracle 19C, this OUI wants the credential for the root user so that it can automatically run that script for us. We may decide to do that by providing the root credential. However, in the real world, you're probably not going to have a root credential to give to this tool. So I'm just going to ignore it for now. And then it will pop up to say, okay, send this to your sysadmin so that it can run that. Next. Now the OUI will do a prerequisite check to be sure that this server can install Oracle. It will check all the packages, all the parameters, all the settings to be sure that everything is fine. This particular setting, if you did a YUM update, you would bypass this setting, this package. You will overcome this, this challenge. But I'm just going to ignore it because it's not crucial at this point. I check ignore, and then I say next. Ignore all these packages. Now, if anything else shows up beyond these two, we need to fix that. Next. A YUM update could have fixed it. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes, I want to continue. Now, this is the summary. I want to install Oracle 19C Enterprise Edition. This is my Oracle base, and that's my Oracle home right there. And these are the groups. And then the root script will be manually run. All right? The response file, it says save response file. We're not going to do that. Allows us to save all the answers we gave so that if we needed to do a mass deployment where we are installing multiple Oracle software on multiple servers, we can provide the response file so that we don't have to sit down and answer all these questions one by one. We're going to install, and now the installation begins. The OUI will double check again. Here are the steps. It will link up the binaries. It will set everything up, and then we will be asked to execute the root script. The root script will be run by the root user, and the software would have been installed. All right, now we are at the point where we need to run the root script. Two scripts are given to us, and they must be run as the root user. Click on the first one, Control-C to copy. Control-C for Charlie to copy. And then we are going to run it as the root user. Right-click, paste that, press enter, and it runs it. Now let's go run the second one. Control-C, right-click, paste, and press enter, accept the default, and it's done. So now we are going to say, okay, we have run the root script and the installation is complete. So Oracle software has been installed. Now we're going to close this, and to test what has been installed, at this point as the Oracle user, if you were to type SQL plus, if everything was properly done, you should have a response. SQL plus is now installed. Oracle 19.3 is installed. Now, the database is not installed. The database is not installed. I just did a Control-C to get out of that. So we are going to install the database. So this is what we followed, all the steps right there. So the next thing we are going to do is, after installing the software, we are going to configure the listener. First, we are going to create a listener, a dynamic listener using NETCA. Again, if you use SecurityRT and you type NETCA, you will have a display issue. NETCA. You have a display issue because it's a graphic user utility. So we're going to go to Mobile XTEM, our friend, Mobile XTEM. And it doesn't matter what directory you are in. You just type NETCA and the tool comes up. Notice that we do not have a listener. So by default, our listener should be in Oracle Home Network Admin. Change directory, Oracle Home Network Admin. This is where our listener will be. So if we do an ls right here, we do not have a listener.aura. We don't have listener.aura. So using NETCA will create the listener.aura and populate it. Now, so we want to create listener. Next, we want to add a listener. So there's no listener to reconfigure, delete, or rename. So we are adding a new listener. Add a listener. By default, the default listener will be called listener. That's fine with us. We're just going to leave it in the default. And we will be listening for TCP protocol connection, meaning that the clients that are coming to connect to your database will come with an IP address. Basically, that's what it means. We will use the default port 1521. Next. Now it says, would you want to configure another listener? Let's go take a look at the lab. Then the lab says, this should create listener.aura. Let's go take a look at that. LS, do we have listener.aura? Not yet. Why don't we have that? All right, let's go complete. Would you like to create another listener? No. Next. Listener configuration complete. Next. Finish. Okay, let's do an ls now. And there we go. There's our listener.aura. If I cut this file so that we can take a look at the content of this file, all that information we entered in NETCA is here. So this is our listener will be called listener, and it will be running from this server. So this is the address, the location of this listener, and this is the port number that the listener will be listening for external connection. Now, most DBAs will delete this line. This is talking about external procedure. This is required for like when say a PL SQL program is attempting to access an external procedure that is external to Oracle. So let's say a Java procedure or a C# program. So most DBAs will delete that, but we'll leave it. It doesn't matter at this stage to us. So we have just created a listener. We have just created a listener. Let's check on the status of this listener. LSNRCTL, listener control, status of this listener. The listener is running. The listener is at port 1521, and that's the host name. And listener supports no service. Listener supports no service means that this listener is not connected to any database. So if you succeed in connecting to this listener from your client, you will not be connected to any database. Okay, let's follow the lab through. It says to use another tool. Now let's showcase another tool called NETMGR. This time we are going to create a static listener at port 1523. The listener will be called app list. All right? What's the difference between a dynamic and a static listener? A dynamic listener will dynamically connect to our database, any database that is installed on this server. But a static listener has been told you can only listen for this particular database. So you don't have that the ability to connect to any other database other than that one. Think about it this way, that if we are holding a party in Sheraton, that we can have a bouncer at the front desk of Sheraton that dynamically decides which room you should go to for your party. So if your party is in room 1521, the bouncer knows that's where he should direct you. If your party is in room 1523, the bouncer directs you. But when we have a static bouncer, that means that the bouncer can only direct you to a particular party, even though multiple parties are taking place in Sheraton. All right. So we are going to invoke NETMGR. Again, NETMGR is a graphic user tool. So we're going to use mobile XTEM to do so. There it is. So let's open this local plus right there and open listener. There's our default listener. Here's our default listener that we just created. Address 1, 1521. Now, to create a new listener, click on listener and click on the plus sign to create a new listener. Now, it defaults to listener 1, but we want to call ours app list. App list. According to the lab, we should call it app list. App underscore list. Application listener. App list. Okay. Say okay. Now, this listener has no address information. So, what will be the listening location? Let's add an address. Automatically it puts for us the domain name, but we decided we want to do 1523. You can't have two listeners listening at the same port. All right? Now, one thing else, now we have created this app list listener, but we want to make it a static listener. First of all, let me save this configuration as is. So this is now a dynamic listener. Save the network configuration, save. So it's a dynamic listener. If I go and cut the listener.aura again, listener.aura. So you see that app list is already created, but it is a dynamic listener, just like the previous listener that we created. So to make it static, we will assign it to a specific database. There is no database assigned. Add a database. So this database, the global name will be ORCL, and the seed will be ORCL. And the Oracle home is already there. And when we save this configuration, it will edit the listener.aura and add extra information. There we go. Now we have extra information. Seed list for app, the listener app list now has a seed list. A seed list is a list of databases that this listener will be assigned to. So this is a dynamic listener in the sense that we don't have a seed list, but this app list is a static listener because it's directly listening for the database called ORCL. Let's go check the status of app list. Listener control status. Now, because it's not the default listener, we have to mention the name. Whether it's uppercase or lowercase, doesn't matter. App list. So you see, app list has not been started. Let's start app list. Listener control start app underscore list. Now app list is started, and it has been told that you are going to be listening for a database called ORCL. So if we check the status of app list, it says, hey, I already know what database I should be listening for, whether the database is here or not. The status of the database is unknown because we don't have a database. But the dynamic listener, which we don't need to mention the name when we type this command, says that listener support no service. In other words, there is no database to listen to dynamically register with. Okay, I think we've done that. Now, using NetCA, we are going to configure connection method. How will the people come? So there are two methods that we are going to configure: Easy Connect as well as TNSNAMES. Down the line, I will demonstrate the use of these two approaches to connect to this database. So we're going to configure connection method to Easy Connect and TNSNAME. This should create a file called SQLNET.aura. Okay, let's quit this tool Net Manager after we have saved. Let's invoke NetCA again. When we invoke NetCA, we want to talk about the naming method. Naming method. How will the people connect? So there are two things we want to configure here. We want to configure local naming, which is TNS naming, and Easy Connect. And directory naming involves Oracle using Active Directory or Oracle directory to connect. External naming like biometrics, like iScan, and all kinds. But let's keep it simple to local naming and Easy Connect. Next, naming method complete, finish. So when I go to my Oracle Home Network Admin, Vadu and LS, I now have a file called SQLNet.aura. If I cut that file, this is the content of that file right here. So it says that we are going to be coming to this party with TNSNAME as well as Easy Connect. All right, we will explain that further along the line when the database is in place. So we have cutted the listener to see all our listeners. We have cutted the SQLNet.aura to see our connection method. Now let's go now and create the database using DBCA. We are going to do online transaction processing, the type of database that will be created, database configuration assistant, DBCA. So that invokes 19C DBCA, which is a graphic user tool. Now, we are going to create a database. Okay, go ahead. Now, because we are opting to create things in different segments, I'm going to select the advanced option. Let me see, do I have screens? Okay. So I'm going to select the advanced option. advanced configuration. In the typical option, Oracle pre-populates this, but I don't want that. I want the advanced option so that I can select what I want. Next, there are three kinds of databases that we can install. We can create a general purpose transaction processing OLTP database. What does that mean? This is the kind of database that is update, delete, insert intensive. Apart from the fact that people are selecting things, I mean, like retail sales, like Bank of America, Walmart, things are constantly being updated, deleted, and inserted. So this is a database that is update, delete, and insert intensive. The data warehouse is a large blob of data, a large blob of database that just warehouses huge data. Now, at the background, Oracle does some organization a little bit different from general purpose database. The data warehouse is more of, you're going to be doing a lot more of select, very, very minimal DML, update, insert, and delete. The custom database is the hybrid, that is the in-between of both. Okay, but we are going to do a single instance database, and we are going to do a general purpose database. Next. What will be the global name of our database? We'll keep it simple. Just call it ORCL. Where did it get this name? It picked it from our environment variable. If your environment variables are set right, the DBCA will pick it up from the environment. Now, is this going to be a multi-tenant, that's pluggable database? For this particular lab, we will not be doing pluggable database. The very next lab, we will be installing Oracle 19C on a pluggable multi-tenant architecture on automatic storage management ASM. So for now, this particular lab, we're going to keep it simple. Remember, in this training, we'll take it one step at a time. We're going to install it on simple file system. Uncheck that. We are not doing container database here. Next, we are going to use the following storage attribute. It will be a file system, not ASM. And this is the way Oracle lays the directory where the data files will be. It will be Oracle-based, Aura data, and the Oracle unique name. The unique name in our case is ORCL. Oracle-based, Aura data, Oracle unique name. And okay, we'll just keep it simple. Next. We are being asked here if we want to designate an area of this for our FRA, fast recovery area. Fast recovery area. Okay, for now, we are not going to designate an FRA, and we are not going to enable archiving for now. Next. Here are the two listeners that we created. They are up and running, and DBCA pre-checks them in as the listener that we are going to be connecting this database to. We can create a listener at this point, but we're not going to do that now. So we're going to allow it to connect to those two listeners. Oracle Vault is for security consolidation. We're not going to do that. We're going to skip all that. We are going to allow the memory sizing to be automatic. Everything is going to be automatic. The Block size is the smallest unit of data in our database. We're going to leave it default. The character set, we are going to leave it as default. Connection mode, we are going to leave it as default. But the sample database, we are going to check the sample database and ensure that we have data to play around with. So this will deploy a lot of schemas like HR, OE, and so on and so forth. Next. Now, starting from 12C, Oracle no longer deploys the full enterprise manager with the database. However, Oracle wants you to connect your database to Enterprise Manager Cloud Control. So here it gives us the option to register the database to Enterprise Manager Cloud Control. We are not going to do so at this point. There's a particular lab coming, and you will be able to add this database to Enterprise Manager Cloud Control. But in the interim, there is a smaller Enterprise Manager deployed with 19C called Enterprise Manager Database Express. So we are going to do that. In most production environment, we usually do not deploy that because in production environment, you will have cloud control. But even when you have cloud control, I prefer not to add it at this stage. I prefer to finish my installation, be sure that everything is fine before adding the server to cloud control. Next. For simplicity, we are going to adopt a simple password for the database. So it will have one password for all these users at this point. That will be my class password DB. And everyone knows what the class password actually is. We could have chosen to give each user different passwords, but for now, we're just going to keep it simple. So we are going to create a database. We actually can also generate a script, make this DBCA to generate a script which we could have used manually to create this database without on the command line without using this tool. Now, all the answers we gave while we were trying to create this database, we could save this as a template. So the next time we want to create a database, we can select the template. You remember the screen where it says, what kind of database do you want? General purpose data warehouse. There will be an option for a template if we opt to save this as a template. Next. So we're just going to create the database. And this is the summary. Our database global name will be ORCL. The Oracle seed, which is system identifier, which is the database name also, will be ORCL. This is not a container database. This is going to be a simple file system and not automatic storage management. And then this will be our audit destination. Our audit file will be stored in the database. Compatibility will be set to 19C. Our control file will be in this location. The smallest unit of storage for our database will be 8K, 8 kilobytes, which is 8192 bytes. Our database name is ORCL, and so on and so forth. Okay. Our control file, there will be two control files created, control file 1, control file 2. I really don't like the fact that my two control files are in the same location, but for now, let's leave it. And here are the data files that will be created and the redo log files that will be created. So let's just leave it at bare minimum. We will then, in some lab that and subsequent labs, we will multiplex our control file and then multiplex our redo logs and then turn the archiver on. Finish. The DBCA will double check everything and begin to install and create the database. It's copying files and the database will be created. Right, the installation is complete. It may take a little while, especially when we get to 85%, tends to look like it's hanging. It's actually not hanging. So right now the installation is complete, and take a look at the summary here. Here is our Oracle seed, and the parameter file is in Oracle Home SP file seed.aura. An Enterprise Manager Express will be invoked via port 5500. Go ahead and close this DBCA. When you close it, now the next thing we are going to do is we are going to log in as the sysdba. So as the Oracle user, so I'm going to log in SQL Plus as the sysdba. If everything was done right, we should have a database up and running. So I'm going to show parameter. Here are all the parameters. And I'm going to show the database name. Show parameter database name. So this is the name of the database, ORCL, and so on. So we can take a look at some of these parameters. Let's see, did we start this database with SP file or P file? Show parameter SP file. Yes, we started this database with SP file seed.aura. Let's go ahead and unlock the HR user, alter user HR identified by HR LAB02B account unlock. So the HR user has been unlocked. So DBCA actually, by the way, let me run this query. Select the name of the database, the open mode from $data file, no, $database. So this database is ORCL, is in read-write mode. Let us go and take a look at the password file and the parameter file. Change directory, Oracle Home, DBS, Oracle Home DBS. So this is the password file. and this is the SP file, parameter file. So DBCA also created a TNSNAME.aura in Oracle Home Network Admin. Change directory, Oracle Home Network Admin. Do an ls. So we have a TNS name right there. Cat which is the content of our TNS name. We can do a TNS ping ORCL, and there are two listeners listening. So this is one listener, that's another listener right there. We can log in as the system user, SQL plus system at ORCL, and the password for system in this case will be the same with sys that we logged on. Show user, the user is system. So we can shut down the database with shutdown immediate. We can start the database in no mount mode. We can do all these queries just to ensure that you do all these queries to kind of practice and see the different modes your database is running. I'm going to skip through it so you make sure that you run those queries. And now, earlier on, we checked the status of listener. So this is how to check the status of your listener. We can stop the listener. We can start the listener. In LAB02C, we are going to use the srvctl grid infrastructure command and the crsctl command to stop our listener database and so on and so forth. From a Windows client now, we want to connect to our database from a Windows client. So let me open command prompt right here. So, and the lab says to log in as the, so I'm just going to log in as the HR user. SQL plus from Windows, HR LAB02B. I think that was the password, HR LAB02B. At my IP address 192.168.1.196. And when I get there, I'm looking for a database called OLCL. Now, this approach to connecting to our database is using what is called Easy Connect. In Easy Connect, there is no need for extra configuration of your client. As long as you have SQL Plus running on your client, you supply every information. Here is the location of the server. Oh, by the way, I think I got something wrong here. I should say the port number, the listening port, and then the name of the database. So the server, the listening port, the name of the database, username, password. We supplied everything. Now, with a company with several databases. Can you imagine you trying to remember all this? This is called Easy Connect. But there's a second type of connection that uses TNSNAME, which means that all this information will already be pre-populated in a file. And then we will give each of our connections some kind of alias, a name. So let's go and do that now. So on Windows command prompt as administrator, we are going to run NETCA. So let's open command prompt. This is command prompt as a non-administrator. If it's administrator, you will see it on this top line. It's important that you open it as administrator. Right click command prompt. Oh, by the way, if you don't have it on your taskbar, you can just go to Start, CMD, and then right click and run as administrator. And that should open command prompt. And now it's opening as administrator, and then you can run NetCA. Same NetCA we ran on the server is being run on the Windows, and now we want to create a TNS entry. So the lab says that we should create a service name ORCL. Let's go and do that. So it's the third one, local name service, local net service name. We're going to add one to an existing one. So it's going to be ORCL. That's the name of our database. It's going to be TCP, and the host name is the IP address of our database, 196. Of course, your IP address will be different from mine, and the port number will be 1521, which is fine. And we are going to call this service name MyDev. Do you want to test it? No, we don't want to test it. We're going to call it MyDev. So all this information that we have entered for this particular connection to our database, it will be called MyDev. Okay, so this will be in the TNS name of the client. Let's go and take a look at the TNS name of the client. So this is the client computer. We're going to this PC, drive C, app, Oracle, product, 12.2 client. So this is our Oracle home. Then network admin. So it creates a file called TNSNAMES. And inside TNSNAME, one of the entry is MyDev. This is the alias. So all the information we entered are stored here. So this is our alias. From now on, we don't need to remember everything. We just remember this alias. MyDev, prod, dev, and so on and so forth. So now, how do I log on to the database using TNS information? I will do SQL plus HR LAB02B is the password at MyDev. So I don't need to remember all the IP address, the port number. They are all in the TNSNAME.aura file. It connects. Also, we can use SQL Developer. So if we connect from SQL Developer, we can define a connection to that database using SQL Developer. Oracle, SQL Developer, hit the green button, new connection. So in this new connection, you will notice that if you change this connection type to TNS, we will now have a drop down my dev. You see that? So you change this connection type from basic to TNS. We will now have my dev listed there. So if I wanted to log into HR at my Unix server, and username is HR. So this is like a bookmark. HR LAB02B is the password. I tell it to save the password, and I don't have to provide IP addresses and so on, because everything is defined in this alias called my dev. Test it, and the test is successful. Save it and close this. And now, where is it? HR at my Unix server. When we open that, we are now connected to the database from a Windows client. Using TNS information. Select star from employees. All right. A few important performance views that you want to look at. Do a query on all these performance views. Take a look at what is in them. This is your table space listed here, your data files, your temp files, your log files, and so on and so forth. Your control file, they are listed here. Now let's go ahead and create. It says create user, your name, identified by welcome one, account unlock. So we're about to create a user called Billy. So you put your name in there. I'm gonna go create it on as the sys user. SQL plus / as sysdbl create user Billy So we're going to create this user. So the password will be welcome one. So this user has been created, user Billy. Make sure you use your own name. And we are going to grant user Billy some privileges. Grant connect resource unlimited table space to the user Billy. Grant select on HR department to the user Billy. Now using SQL Plus or Oracle SQL Developer, connect as the HR user. We have already done that. So do some of this query. I just did this one. So you can do the rest. So create a new user, a new connection using TNS for user Billy. So I can create a new connection, same way I did the previous one. Open the big green plus, Billy at my Unix server. That's the bookmark. The username is actually Billy. The password is welcome1. I want to save the password. And I'm going to use TNS connection. TNS connection my dev. Test it and save it. So with TNS connection, I don't need to remember the IP address. So if I connect with user Billy, there we go. I can run query, select star from hr.departments. Remember, the department table of HR has been, user Billy has been granted access to it. So here's the command that gave Billy access to HR department, the ability to select. If I attempt to select the employees table of HR as user Billy, I will have an error that says table doesn't exist because I don't have the permission. You have not been given the permission to do this. All right, we can also connect to our database using Toad. We can connect using Toad. Now I'm just going to do one connection as the sys, no, as the HR user. So open Toad. You should have the Toad icon on your desktop. You can close this. Toad for Oracle. Same thing with SQL Developer. Just it's a far better tool than SQL Developer. We're going to create a new connection. If you don't have this middle window, we can always open it by session, new connection. So new connection, I'm going to log in as the sys user. I'll put the sys password. And I'm going to do a TNS name. And now I expect my dev to show up. And the sys user is always connecting as the sys DBA. And I connect. Close that. So now I am connected as the sys user using the TNS information, my dev. So if we do select all that from v.database and run that, all right, ORCL is installed. We're going to take another quick snapshot of our virtual machine. So our database is installed, Oracle 19c is installed, and in the next lab, we are going to create a table space, data files associated with the table space. We are going to create role, user, and then assign system and object privilege on this particular database. And then we will back up our database in lab 4. We have lab 4A, backup of database. We're going to back up the database using the command line. Then in lab 4B, we will back up the database using Enterprise Manager Cloud Control. Then in Lab 5 series, we will use data pump to move data from one database to the other, including using the advanced features of data pump, power file, and the ability to use the where clause to filter our data. In Lab 6, we will simulate disaster by deliberately deleting our control file and one data file, and we will use RMAN to restore and recover the data file. We will then multiplex our control file and our redo log file. And there are other advanced labs that follow this lab. We will patch the database. We'll apply Oracle quarterly patch. In one of the labs, we will be upgrading Oracle 11G to 12C. And then we will take 12C and upgrade it to 19C. We will clone a database and change the name of the database as we clone it using RMAN duplicate. It's going to be a very interesting few weeks. I hope you were able to implement this lab from the beginning to the end of it. If you have any challenge, you can shoot a screenshot or email to this email address or the WhatsApp forum for the training, and we will promptly respond to your inquiries. Now, the last portion of this lab, this is really optional. I don't want you to be bogged down with this, but it is optional. I want you to, if I close, let me close SQL Developer. Please select all. I'm going to close Toad also. Now, on the virtual machine, the Linux server, firewall has been disabled. Let's go and check the status of the firewall. And now only the root user can do this. System control status of firewall. So we're checking the system of the firewall. It has been disabled. When it is enabled, all ports are going to be blocked. So let's go ahead and enable it. So now I have enabled firewall and it has blocked every port. If I attempt to log into SQL Plus now, I will not be able to do so. I tried to log into the database as the HR user. I'm not able to anymore because all ports have been blocked. And remember, this alias is attempting to use port 1521. You see, it hangs right there. I can't proceed. The door has been locked shut because firewall is enabled. Now, we can open the port we can open the port 1521, 1523, and port 5500, which is our listening port. These are our listening port, and the port for Enterprise Manager Express. I'm going to just enable firewall. I'm going to just stop the firewall and allow you to test your Googling skills to disable firewall and then open these individual ports. So I'm just going to stop the firewall, but you don't have to stop it. I'm asking you to Google and find out, how do I open these ports? Finally, another optional task is to open Enterprise Manager Express. I open a browser, https:// my IP address, :5500 / Enterprise Manager. If everything goes fine, the warning here is because my browser is going there for the first time. Advance, accept the risk, because this is a HTTPS is a secured site, and I'm going to log in as the sys user, and I'm going to provide the sys password for the database, and then log into Enterprise Manager Express. So this is the Enterprise Manager Database Express. This is the name of our database. It's version 19.3. It's been running for the last few minutes, for 6 minutes. And these are some of the activities. This database is installed on Linux 64-bit. It's the enterprise version. The archiver is not running. Here are some of the sequels that have been running the past few minutes. I go to the Performance Hub. It shows me the performance of my database, CPU usage, I/O usage, anything that is causing it to wait, and so on and so forth. Here are SQL commands that are running. I can click on it. I can see the exact SQL command that is running. So this is Oracle Enterprise Manager Database Express. Very limited functionality, doesn't do much. Oracle expects you to use Enterprise Manager Cloud Control. In this class throughout, we will be using Enterprise Manager Cloud Control, which allows us to manage multiple databases. All right. We will see you in the next lab. I hope you were able to successfully implement this lab. Thank you.